out at 7:30 Wednesday, 16th November 2022. You may think it's odd for me to state the obvious, but this meeting is broadcast live and recorded, so it's useful to have that at the beginning. On the point of it being broadcast and recorded, if anyone here prefers it not to be broadcast or recorded, or their voice not to be heard, then the thing you can do is leave, or at the very least make sure you're not in the camera angle. The camera does move about a bit. At present, the members of the public who are here, welcome. You're not in the camera at the moment, but you could be at some time. Okay. My name is Roger Butterworth. I'm chair of this committee. The agenda was circulated one in advance. Does anyone who needs a copy have a copy? Okay. I'll turn to the clerk for the meeting. Well, I know there are no apologies, so because everyone's here. Any declarations of interest from any members present and councillors? No declarations of interest. Thank you. Chairman's report on urgent items, which is the usual heading here. I'm not aware that there are any items.
No, Chair, I'm not aware of this.
Thank you very much. Public questions in accordance with Standing Order 20. I appreciate some of them probably hear particular items. That's not what this heading means. It's quite formal again.
So, Chair, there are no public questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting were circulated. Any comments from members of the committee? Is everyone happy for me to sign? Thank you very much. 16th, isn't it?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Minutes of other meetings. Perhaps I would say, because there are members of the public here interested in particular items, rather than going through everything in the strict order of the agenda, we'll pull forward to an early stage, not just yet, but shortly, those items that members of the public are interested in. Accordingly, immediately after item 6, I propose that we deal with item 7.11, which is the events programme, followed by 7.9, which is the review of the HTC events protocol, followed by 7. Well, so we can do 7.7, which is the green space management. Sorry, 7.6. You're right. Thank you. That's right. 7.6, which no, I'm not making a lot of sense there. It is 7.6, isn't it? We deal with because it's related to those, even though it's not contentious. What we said.
Yeah, that's correct. Unfair charges.
7.6. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
That's correct.
And then we'll do 7.8, the sustainability market publication review, and then we'll go back to the order 7.1, etc. Hope that's helpful. Dealing with minutes of other committee meetings, page 5 onwards. First is the allotments working party. Doesn't need to be too formal, but then Councillor Heritage, you wish to present minutes?
Yep, happy to present these minutes to committee this evening. No comments to make. No. The only thing I'd like to say is that we mentioned it in the minutes on that, but Councillor Lineker and I had 2 very enjoyable long mornings during the annual inspection of the allotments, which we were very impressed by the standard of our allotment sites. A substantial number in the district in.
Thank you, Councillor Heritage. I will. Nothing more to say. It's normal to ask any questions. The next is the page 9, the Christmas Carnival Working Party. Councillor Scriven.
Purely to present the minutes of the Christmas Carnival Working Group meeting held meetings from 8th of October through to the 4th of October. And there was no notice to the council for the committee on that.
you very much. And Christmas Carnival working for the two, aren't there? Actually, page 12 as well. There's nothing more to add. And again, as Scrivener very popular, the Remembrance Day working party on page 16.
Yes, again, just to present the minutes of the Remembrance Day Working Party meetings held 4th of July and 5th of September 2022. As you know, we had the Remembrance Parade in service on Sunday, which I think all went very well, and we will be having a washing up meeting early in December.
Thank you, Councillor Scrivener. So can we all agree that we received all of those minutes? Very much. Okay. So now we can go to item 711, which is the events programme. We'll begin this with the town clerk presenting oral report. But clearly, someone here requires, which is to speak on behalf of Barbican Events. And I got Mr. Andrew Dempsey. What I would do now, so you know what we're doing, because our standing orders don't provide for members of the public who are not residents ordinarily to speak at these meetings. I'm happy to propose from the chair that we should permit you to speak substantially on the terms of standing order 20.1, which is the standing order applies to resident speaking. Do I have a seconder for that? Okay, are we all agreed? So you will be able to speak. But I'd like the town clerk to present his oral report first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just by way of introduction to this one and to elaborate on the written report you've got in front of you. The report focused on the events programme for 2023 that is set out in Appendix A of the report. And the committee will recognise that this events programme is largely very similar to what we've seen in the past 2 years. You'll also note that there is specific reference that you've made already to the Oktoberfest event running in 2023. By way of background, Oktoberfest is a beer, food and music festival hosted in a themed marquee German-style entertainment, live music with traditional beer and German food. The application for next year is to run over 2 weekends with a total of 7 sessions, each session with hosts able to host up to 1,200 guests. Including the setup and de-rig days, the event would be on the Common from the 25th of September to the 12th of October, which is a total of 18 days. The first thing I'd just like to say, Chair, in terms of the officer position on this, is just to clarify that our views are related to the nature of the event and does not relate to the event organisers in any way, or our views on whether they're able to deliver events of this nature or any other event. We have no issue on that latter point. And in fact, we think that the event organisers have been very responsive over the last 2 years to different points that we've asked to be addressed. And separately, we've also offered to provide them a reference to other landowners should they need it for other ventures. Some other important information in regard to this decision that the committee may well already be aware of, but I will just reiterate. Firstly, the council is not duty bound in any way to allow anybody to run events on our land, with the exception of some fun fairs who are subject to Showman Guild's rights. The council is also not duty bound to deal with requests for events in a certain way. However, locally we do have our events protocol, which coincidentally is an item later on in the agenda, and we follow that protocol. The officer's role is to provide advice and guidance to the committee or the council as we deem appropriate, and we're not under any obligation to represent the views of third parties. Where relevant, we do try to provide recommendations, as you know, as is the case on the item this evening, and sometimes these recommendations are unpalatable to some individuals or groups. I know the event organiser has shared plenty of views in advance of this meeting, and I'm really pleased that the committee's also had given the opportunity for them to speak, because I think it's very important that the committee hears the views that they have got to share. The background to the event in Harpenden: it was first delivered in Harpenden in 2021 over one weekend as a pilot. Subsequently, we allowed it to go over 2 weekends this year. As part of the request in the build up to the 2022 request was that the organisers wished to have a 3-year licence to use the land. But at that point of the request, we felt this wasn't appropriate because we wanted to pilot the 2 weekends first of all. When we agreed the 2 weekends, they came with a number of key conditions, one being to have better engagement with local pubs who had some concerns after year one. And I know the event organisers reached out to a number of pubs, and I also understand that some of those didn't properly engage with them despite their efforts. In terms of reaching the officer recommendation, we look at this event in terms of 2 key things within the protocol. First of all, the impact the event has on the physical and social environment of the area. And secondly, the enjoyment, safety and quality of life for residents, visitors and local businesses. 2 key points I say are in the protocol. I know the committee have seen lots of examples put forward by the organisers of the positive impact of the event. And as mentioned, they're obviously going to have the opportunity to speak. However, there have been some concerns expressed from businesses, residents and some partners. And it is important for us as officers to take the opportunity to highlight these. And in our view, it's the weight of these negative and concerns that shape the officer recommendation that's in the report. In terms of feedback, to elaborate a couple of points from the report, feedback from venues, we received feedback from 4 venues in close proximity to the Common that expressed concerns. And those views including impacting regular customers and existing bookings they had. Some had to restrict entry or close early. They're having to deal with sick or unwell individuals that meant they had problems with their property. And there was other inappropriate behaviour, should we say. The feedback from residents, I have seen informal feedback from residents on social media that set out some positives and negatives. I also know there was a poll that was conducted and shared. But in terms of formal complaints received by the Town Council, after the first event, or actually during the first event, we received 5 in 2021. And within those, all 5 mentioned noise complaints and 1 mentioned inappropriate use of the Common. Although that's a more generic point around that individual wishing to see less on the Common more generally, as opposed to it necessarily being about that event. This year we received 13 formal complaints, and included within those there was 9 complaints about noise, reference to antisocial behaviour, including personal abuse, criminal damage, urinating, vomiting, and again a reference to too many events being allowed on the Common that are inappropriate for the town. And then the final area of feedback is from the police. And again, I know that event organisers have shared a review email from Paul Pickett, which I'm sure you've all read. This email confirmed a number of things which are broadly in line with what we've put in our report. So the first weekend was very busy for the police, generating 6 crimes. It also generated a number of calls for drunken behaviour, which didn't result in a crime report. And there was dedicated police officers visiting the venue and patrolling the wider area. The police confirmed that the organisers took the police concerns really seriously and implemented a response. And the second weekend, there was fewer calls and just 2 crimes reported. The police sergeant also said that if the same level of resourcing coupled with comprehensive CCTV were maintained to the level of the second weekend, it wouldn't, in his view, wouldn't have a major impact on the town from a crime and disorder perspective in the future. He did also note that his licensing officer would need to be in liaison with the licensing officer of the district council. So just to conclude, Chair and committee, and to reiterate, the recommendation is that we put forward as officers is not a reflection on the event organisers in any way. It's based on whether we feel that the nature of this event is appropriate for Harpenden Common, given its close proximity to the town centre and to the residential streets nearby.
Thank you, Colin. Mr. Dempsey, would you like to speak? Under standing orders, you have 3 minutes, but I have discretion to allow you to speak a second time or longer. And hopefully, if you have spoken in the course of the debate, you may also be able to answer any particular questions councillors have. So decide whether you're speaking from the chair or standing or what you want to do.
More than happy to be speaking from the chair.
Got 3 minutes.
Amazing. So yeah, good evening and thank you all for the opportunity to speak and represent Hertfordshire Oktoberfest. Thank you for the chair for bringing the matter on the agenda brought forward for our interest as well. Thank you for the town clerk as well for detailing that report to you all. I think coming from a hospitality background, myself and Tom have over 20 years of experience. We truly love and understand this industry. We understand the graft behind the crafts. And I think at this moment in time, hospitality industry, as we're all aware, is on its knees. The camera had recently reported that over 10 pubs a week are now closing. And I think this is something that we can later highlight, which is a benefit from us. It is an event like ours that the local pubs and restaurants can massively benefit from. The George of Harpenden, they hit a record week during Oktoberfest, and the Inn on the Green actually reported a 40% rise in sales during this time. We do understand that with the nature of our event, these benefits come with some challenges. However, with the right community support, security and communication, we believe that these minimise the issues and the local economy can benefit greatly from this. Also, whilst we're here tonight, I do appreciate that we are highlighting for us some key main points for us in this. One being, of course, the police report from Sergeant Pickett, as quoted from the town clerk, or the fact that I think that you'd be aware that we've been trying to send some testimonials to you guys from some local businesses around in the Harpenden area as well. And also the fact that the Oktoberfest event in Harpenden was actually a great catchment to bring in people from outside of Harpenden to show the town. From our research, we have Harpenden is actually the 5th most popular catchment of buying tickets, showing that there are actually 4 surrounding areas of people that would want to come into the neighbouring town and come experience what Harpenden, and more importantly, what Hertfordshire Oktoberfest had to offer. I think it's always been our intention to work closely with the council. We have some great relationships with Council Officer Harriet, and I think we've tried to show that we want to deliver a safe event. We want to continue delivering this safe event. I think this is all down to key collaboration with not just the council, but local businesses and anything else that we can do to kind of help benefit this community. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Quite unusually for a public speaker, you have kept your 3 minutes. Thank you very much. So open the floor to councillors to make comments or raise questions. If you raise them as it were to the chair, and we'll sort of look at this and then ask Mr. Dempsey afterwards. Shall I start? So you're not going to pick them up one by one necessarily, unless we will dry up. But I noticed that in emails which I did read from Mr. Dempsey and colleagues, 8,000 attendances, attendees, of which 7,100 were from outside Harpenden, which means only 900 were in Harpenden. So in terms of an event for Harpenden residents, it was more actually for a lot more for non-residents. But the other aspect, of course, is was it a benefit to the pubs and the like, on which there appear to be mixed views. So that starts it off. Anyone else want to say anything? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so just a question. This probably I'm not sure it's for town clerk or for this, but so how many for the application made for 2023? How many is it per sitting? Do you know?
I had 1,200.
1,200. Is that the same as 2022?
I suspect it is. We can ask in a moment.
Okay. And then it'd be the same to 2 weekends. Is it one on the Friday night, 2 on the Saturday, and 1 on the Sunday? Well, the first weekend was different. It's the same, pretty much the same as this year.
We can ask the detail.
Okay, but same as this year, in effect, in terms of numbers.
Same or similar. I understand, but we can ask for confirmation.
Yeah. Just in terms of whether the proposed event next year would be of the same size or bigger or smaller, or just so I get, because that could make an impact into whether it's how it could be managed.
Yeah, I'm making note of the questions.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so just the sitting and time.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. Well. That's a-
I'm caught in two minds on this one. Mainly because we have the cinema on the common, we get comments, not always coming through the council, the councillors. As it's on the common this year, we had comments about the noise of motorbikes on the main road, and indeed the overspill for the local hostelry up the road. People drinking outside on the grass, and why were they allowed to? Why were they served drink to be consumed outside? We haven't threatened to cancel Classics on the Common. I know they do it with a different kind of agreement with ourselves. Likewise, we haven't threatened to stop the cinema coming. Now, the cinema, I understand, was the volume of the films being done, and I understand, if I took Carl's figures correctly, most of the complaints were for noise. I haven't got a copy of the temporary event license because I couldn't find it online for the district, although I sit on the licensing committee now for the district council. If the noise problem could be solved, and I was quite surprised that if there was in excess of the allowed decibels being sent out from the marquee, that the district licensing officer didn't come out with his machine to check the decibels that were actually coming out. So this could be, I don't know whether this could be addressed in the future, or if it was ever allowed again. That is my biggest concern. The antisocial behaviour things, I think, is something which happens most Saturday nights, somewhere around St Albans, or indeed probably somewhere around here. It's sad. Briefly Pickett, I'm pleased the way he's reacted to it, because I think the police have got enough work to do without having to find officers to manage this during the evening. And I know mention has been made by several residents, it should be moved to the Hertfordshire Showground. The problem with that is there is no public transport there. So we're encouraging people to drink and drive. At least to Harpenden, people can come by train from north or south, and there are buses occasionally, but taxis. But I think we would be encouraging people to drive, which I don't want to do. So I'd like to hear what other people say, but those are my personal thoughts at this moment.
Thank you, Councillor Heritage. Any more thoughts from councillors? Yes, okay.
I was at Lord's Hall on one of the evenings that the event was held, and the noise was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Trying to walk to the event, the number of comments that were thrown my way, what on earth is going on? Actually, in Lord's Hall itself, you could hear the noise, which disrupted the event considerably. My strong objection to this is based purely on noise.
Thank you, Councillor Lincoln. That's true.
Just for some context, I live on Overstone Road, so I know that's one of the roads that you name as having monitored noise. Certainly on the first weekend, the noise was quite something, and I know it's to do with environmental conditions, the wind, etc. We could hear lyric for lyric from inside the houses. the noise from the common. Now I understand that some changes were made, and I didn't notice it the following weekend. So whether that was to do with environmental changes or the actual changes made within the event, I don't know. I also have young children, and after the first weekend, I received a very strong complaint personally. So I made it my business to make sure I was in town, and I happened to be in town that Saturday. And the following Saturday at sort of around the kick-out time after your first session. And I must admit, for me, the concern is that Saturday afternoon session. I think you can sort of, the 3 evening sessions, I kind of almost feel like we can maybe get away with, but I kind of feel like in its current format over 2 weekends and with 7 sessions, it's hugely disruptive. And I think particularly that sort of 4:30, I think it was 5 o'clock kick out, where you've got young families in the town still, you know, maybe out for a meal, maybe just doing whatever you're doing in town. There were a lot of drunken people around, which again, you expect with an event of this nature. I tried to make it humorous to my own children, but I could see how some people might find that quite distressing. And I think that there were some behaviours seen as well by younger children that maybe weren't appropriate. So that's my main concern, is that sort of afternoon session when families can't really escape it.
Thank you, Councillor Scriven. Yes, Councillor Green.
Thank you. That's a really interesting point. Just on Councillor Scriven's point, my kids are a little bit older, they're teenagers, and there is loads of teenagers in this town, and we've also got to think of the impact on them, because they will still be walking around. So I do totally take your point and would agree with that. I think my main thing is, I know that some pubs were closed. My husband was out just normally to a pub, and there were 3 pubs that closed early or closed their doors early, which disrupted his cat shop. But, you know, he lives. I think the one regret I've had is that there is 900 people out of, I can't remember what the total amount was now, that actually are from Harpenden. And I haven't seen much publicity for Harpenden people to go, and we talked about it. I remember we talking about it, like, oh, you know, it'd be nice for it to be a more local event, like the other events on the Common. And I haven't seen much in the way of encouragement of that.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Cowley,
Thank
last but not least.
Well, you know, I figured I ought to contribute. But no, I was gonna just to add a few extra things. As councillors would be aware, I'm always generally quite pro-business where we can be pro-business, and where I think it adds something to the local economy. So I always come into these things with an inclination towards, if an event is suitable and appropriate, allowing it to happen. However, I can echo, I live about 200 yards down the road from Councillor Scriven, and slightly more protected in terms of there's more building between me and the Common than there is for Councillor Scriven. But I agree, on the first weekend, the noise on Overston was audible in a way that was sort of, I can imagine what it would have been like further down the hill. And I think if we're looking at the effects on local businesses, we have to hope that there's a net positive for any event that we do. I think, broadly speaking, there probably was on balance a net positive, but I think it looks pretty marginal if we're talking about businesses having to close early, and we're talking about damage to some local businesses. And then, as Councillor Priggan said, if we have a common that's for local people to enjoy, and we're hosting events which are predominantly from people from outside the town, they're not having necessarily a net economic impact, and they're causing detrimental impact for neighbours. I'm struggling to be more positive in a way that I might normally sort of instinctively like to be. Just for some context, I wonder if the town clerk could tell us whether 13 complaints is relative to normal sort of parameters of other events that we get, what that sort of is that 13 more than we would expect? Is that about what we would expect for an event of this kind of size? Just to give some context.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Rose?
Just briefly, I didn't go to this event and I'm sort of out of range, as it were, in terms of noise. I have been to the Oktoberfest in Munich, which is a very large event. It's full of big tents of different breweries and, you know, the drinking and sausages and umpire bands and all that sort of stuff. But the problem here seems to be the noise level and you know, the sort of antisocial behaviour that's gone on afterwards. That seems to be the difficulty. So.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I'll make a further comment, if I may. The noise is a problem. It's not the only noisy event on the common. But the point about this style event, and I go back to the 10 o'clock saying, it's the nature of the event, it's not the way it was managed. The whole point of it is getting drunk and having a good time, or I should say, having a drink or two and having a good time for a certain age group, which inevitably produces noise because that's the sort of music they like, generalising, and sadly there's collateral damage in the sense of the social behaviour, which I think distinguishes it from the cinema where the point is watching a film and the drink is incidental. And first on the common where look at the cars and the drinking is incidental. We do have a beer festival, which is about drinking beer, which is a slightly different demographic, and therefore the consequences are somewhat different. So back to what the town clerk said, the point is this the nature of event that we want in our town? I've got all sorts of age groups, and you know it's our job to provide facilities for all sorts of age groups. But it is also a family town. It's not a destination for usually for the whole of Hertfordshire. Preston Common is probably an exception to that. And therefore we're doing something predominantly for people outside the town. We do have to look to see whether we really are benefiting the commerce in the town. And people who write glowing testimonials, read them, fine, thank you very much. But other people who may not look so favourable on it are probably not so willing to go public and be quoted and named as to who they are. So we're relying to some extent on our feedback mechanism for gauging the effect on the hospitality trade in the town. Could I ask, not just this minute, we'll come back to incidents in a moment, it's just another question, I've been listing them. Could I ask whether any of those whose testimonials you kindly passed on have any financial interest in the beer festival, for example? Were they selling beer in the tents? I'll come back to that. Could I ask the town clerk if he has any reactions to things he's heard so far? Please.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Chair. So I think there was one direct question for me in terms of number of complaints. So this event generates much more formal complaints than anything else event-wise and more generally what we do. The only other event that was mentioned by Councillor Heritage that does generate some complaints, a couple of complaints every year, although those are directed to the event organiser, is Classics, on the basis of some of the issues you point out in terms of that particular drinking in that particular area. So yes, far more formal complaints than we get for anything else. If I can just offer a couple of other points then. I think it's just important for balance whilst, the officer position is clear on this. Just in response to a couple of things, in terms of noise, I think we must be fair to the event organisers that We introduced, one of the things we introduced this year was a requirement to make sure that there was engagement with environmental health beforehand. And that engagement happened. There were issues during the first weekend that were responded to, there were adjustments that were made. And that kind of links to one of my early opening points that actually as event organisers, I think they've shown to be good event organisers in that regard. The issue is that even with the changes to the adjustments to the noise, it is still a very noisy event because of the nature of it. But you know, they certainly did follow through with the things that we asked to in terms of the engagement. That's important to say. And it is also important, I didn't say this in the introduction, but perhaps just should highlight it from an income point of view. We do receive a commercial income for the event, which in its very nature is utilised to do other things in the town. So there is a community element, a benefit element to that side. It's important I make those two points. They are, but to be fair to the event organisers and the event itself.
Okay, I don't wish to preclude councillors from continuing the debate, but I think it's appropriate now, Mr. Dempsey, if you'd like to just react to the direct questions and equally if you want to react to anything else that's been said.
Yeah, of course. I think first of all, referring back to your previous question of if there's any financial gain from any of the testimonials. So Emilio's was the only testimonial that I could say would have some financial advantage in terms of they were actually at the event and they were trading. Along with 3 other food traders on that day. But for the rest of the testimonials, any reviews that you would have read, there would have been no financial gain whatsoever. The only collaboration we would have had with a brewery was Mad Squirrel, which obviously you would have received no testimonial from them. Reverting back to as well, Councillor Scriven with talking about the 4 p.m. Session, the afternoon session. I think one thing that especially from event organisers and something that the town clerk has definitely highlighted from us is that there has been collaboration and haptic feedback from us. The agenda or the report definitely showed there to be a binary decision of the yes or the no. What we wanted to see was more of just a collab between the both of us and talking about any kind of issues that were raised and what any preventative actions that we could put in place. So, talking about the pubs closing early, we've spoken to many pubs now that we've spoken saying that we'd provide security to these pubs and ensuring that they can really filter in the good clientele that they would want in there and the people that maybe had too much are left to maybe find their way home. I think also with the local business, we want to keep pushing this further and further. At the age of 26, I can guarantee you I've definitely not got this completely right, but I do think that we are showing that we are improving year on year, and being an advocate for strong business, I think what we can be doing for next year is showing how we can really benefit the community even more, talking with local schools and art projects, anything like this, that we are all open ears. I think the one thing and the reason why we have our presence here today is that the report has shown that there is no, the recommendation is not to go ahead, but hey, talk to us. Let's try and iron out some of these issues.
Thank you very much. I noted the question of Councillor Hill about the confirmation about the numbers per session and the timings of the sessions proposed for next year.
Yeah, of course, and it's even with such things like the noise with the tent. We've spoken with some council officers about rotating the tent 180 degrees, so you have the entrance pointing towards the cricket club, which I do guarantee would make a reduction on the noise and the funneling out from the front as well. Just one of the other ideas that we can talk about. Oh, yes. Now, yeah, back to the previous question. It was the exact same. Yes, exactly. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey.
Thank you.
Very clear. Okay, councillors, any further thoughts before we take a conclusion?
Thank you, Chair. A question for the town clerk. Is there, I just based on that point about collaboration and not necessarily making a yes/no decision. Is there anything that in the officers' opinion could be done that hasn't already been talked about that might make the event better and therefore something that we could, or the officers could recommend?
Please, town clerk, yes, that's that.
So my response to that would be that the key point that adds weight to us is the issues that local businesses and the police put forward. Residential complaints are important, but you know, we will always get people that like things locally and that don't like things. The key weighing factor for me and colleagues when we speak about it was the impact on local pubs and the impact on police resources. So whilst Sergeant Pickett put forward his review, noted that he was monitoring the event, was engaged in it. For me, that means that that's police resources that are being put to the event as a result of the nature of it. So that to me adds weight in a negative form. My concern is that I don't think we can ever deal with the noise properly, because I think it'll always be really loud, even if it's within approved environmental health decibels. So I don't think we can ever achieve that. The thing we're more worried about is the wider impact on the town. So, for example, putting security on pubs, venues, I think is a good addition. My worry would be is what happens to those people that are too drunk to get into the pubs and are left to their own devices. You know, where do they end up in and around a town centre? And I think so that's my kind of, I guess, high level point to this. It is the nature of the event that means you will always have the issues that we've got. You can minimise them, but they will always be there. I mean, there is a question mark when listening to Councillor Scriven about that Saturday afternoon session. That clearly is a big issue, I think. That was a big issue from some of the pubs and from the antisocial behaviour. So if the committee were in a position where they wanted to suggest alternative ways to trade, then that could make a difference. But I can't sit to the committee and say if these three things happen, it would make this event okay, or the nature of the event okay. So trying to answer your question there, but it's without a crystal ball, it's a bit difficult.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mark. As you say, and I listen very carefully, it's the nature of the event. It's not just tweaking it.
Yeah,
that's the root of your concern. Thank you. Any other comments from councillors? Can I make it clear that the recommendation is to approve the Hartland Events Calendar 2023, which is attached. We haven't discussed any of the other items, and I think we let's give you opportunity to raise any questions if there are any questions on the other items. Further to that, if we vote on that, then we're voting on an events programme which excludes the Oktoberfest, and quite definitely excludes it because the recommendation is that we don't repeat that. If there is a view, I say if there is a view to include the Oktoberfest, then it seems to me, and I've discussed this with the town clerk, that what we need is a councillor to propose an amendment to the resolution, seconded, basically, that the event calendar 2023 be approved, subject to the addition of Oktoberfest. And unless we have such a proposal that's seconded and debated, then since we don't have anything more to discuss on that, because the programme is the programme without Oktoberfest standard form, we don't just have free range to how we want. So in a sense, although we've all tried to be fair, giving the views on the one hand this and on the one hand that, if no two councillors are prepared to propose and second that amendment, then that's it as far as the Oktoberfest element is concerned, and we just go on to the events programme as a whole. Do you agree?
I do, Chair, yeah.
Spot. I don't hear a proposer or a seconder. Okay. That's your answer, I'm afraid. So we can discuss any other aspects of the events programme. If anyone wants to raise any further questions. It is pretty similar to the current year, is it not?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
And seeing as the subject of noise has been raised in Connect Oktoberfest, as we have heard, other events can be noisy. And I guess part of the answer to that is when we get to the protocol, there's some things in there, not there yet, I know there's some things in there which want to ameliorate that.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. So our own events are subject to the protocol in the same way that any third parties are, so we're required to follow that with other criteria.
Okay. So are there any comments or questions on the events programme? Then I have a proposer to approve the event plan 2023 as attached. As it's proposed. Mr. Cowley, second, that's Scriven. Let's just go hands. All those in favour? Seems to be unanimous. No against. Thank you, Judge. The answer you wanted, I presume. You may be very welcome not to attend the rest of the meeting unless you particularly want to.
I appreciate that. And thank you anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Very complicated. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Right, that was number 11. We said we would do 9 next, which is the events protocol on page 82. And we have a speaker.
Superman name. Graham's name for it.
That's correct. Let's do the soft mic.
Nice, yeah.
As your resident, I don't need to have a formal vote on hearing you. That's
Yeah.
Yes, let me do the same way around as we did before. The clerk of the meeting and town clerk actually wish to introduce the subject, and then we can.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. So this report presents a refreshed protocol. It's been redrafted to make it more logical and easier to follow. The significant changes are it outlines a slightly updated process for considering applications, but it's very similar to what it was before, but the language is made much easier to understand. It includes an updated list of clear definitions, which includes event sizes and organiser definitions. It introduces the concept of seasonal charging for deposits because of the greater risk to the green spaces during the winter months. It adds the new Harpenden Town Council owned land, and the event application form has been updated to make it more comprehensive, so it requests more information from the organisers. So that's the main changes within the redrafted protocol, and committee are asked to consider it.
Before we hear from Mr. Topham, could you just explain what changes have been made in relation to noise? Because I believe some have.
Yeah, Chair, I can certainly pick that up. So the key change to the noise section is that now there is a requirement, and I actually mentioned this in the previous item, now we require event organisers to engage with environmental health prior to the event to ascertain what they believe is suitable noise levels, and then for the event organisers to deliver the event to those noise levels. That's the key change within the noise. Previously, there was a line in there that said if there were any noise complaints from environmental health, you would be charged X amount. So actually, we've made it a requirement now that there's an engagement up front with the environmental health team to ascertain for that particular event what would be appropriate. And I say that particular event because depending on the event, the type of noise, what's been shown in cinema, whatever it might be, that advice might be different. So that's the key, upfront engagements, that we've got confidence that they are within environmental health standards.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Johnson, your favourite subject for 3 minutes.
Okay, really what I mean, it is noise, but there's a little bit more.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you like to say either precisely or roughly where you live?
Oh, I live on Southdown Road. I live opposite the ponds. I live right by all of this stuff. Okay, and I bought the house 20 years ago with the fairs and the arts fair and the cars, and was very happy. Okay, and all the other stuff that's gone on, and you know, even when we had the religious tent that was there for a week and doing its thing, was great. Most of it had not provided excessive noise. So my issue is not about the cars. They come for a day, everyone has a great time, they make a lot of noise, and I think that's really quite nice. And lots of petrol heads, and then it all goes away again. And it's a great charity event, and it's got to be a great big thing for Hertfordshire, and I think for the whole region. So it's not that I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is not to end up with another Oktoberfest. So what I'm asking in the one of the things I'm asking in the protocol is that we put some decibel limit into it. Because I heard from somebody before, the decibels, because I mean, with the Oktoberfest, it was 100 decibels. I mean, as I wrote to Roger, that's having a nightclub in my front garden. Okay. Now, when you get to something like 80 decibels, you don't get it in my bedroom. Okay, 80s, 70s decibels. So when we talked about winding things down, yes, it's not intrusive in the same way. So something a little bit more than just what public health, because public health standards by Royal National Institute for the Deaf are actually quite high in terms of it has to be in the 88 to actually cause any eardrum damage. So therefore, from a health perspective, it's fine. From a trying to sleep perspective, it's not so good. I'm not actually being physically damaged by it. So I would request that you sort of firm it up a bit. Pick a point in time in the decibels level and say, well, sort of 80 is good unless someone's got a really good reason. And I have to say, if you're doing an event for a day or a night, it doesn't really matter. Right? It's when you've got this recurrent events that go on. You get if the church guys turned up for their tent for a week and they were knocking out 90 decibels for a week, that'd be very intrusive. They turn up for a day and have a sing-song, who cares, right? So it's sort of scale. So it's more to do with commercial events and that kind of stuff than it is about charity events or, you know, I don't know, whatever you call a religious event and that sort of stuff. Would be nice if we I think I would ask you to put a stopper in there, at least makes reflection. Because the truth I find is I went out to measure the decibels in the tent. No one from the council goes. So having a fine or a deposit of £500 for making a screaming great noise all weekend doesn't really do me any good. What I would like is you to put a level of deposit in there which totally discourages the fact that commercially it makes no sense to make that kind of noise. Therefore, it commercially wouldn't make any sense to have a noisy do like the Oktoberfest here, because the deposit and the loss of it would basically make it not relatively an economic no-starter for them. So I find that the fine level is a bit pointless when you've got an event like that where they've got 8,000 people coming through. And I saw this event in Swansea a couple of weeks ago.
Mr. Topic, are you drawing to a close, please? Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Are you all right?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. I think we got your.
Got the drift. Thank you.
So a number of issues there. Now, just ask the meeting clock and the town clerk to react. I mean, it's noise, a single day event, fine. You didn't say those words, but that was the implication. It's the recurring events in successive days, effectively. And Tom didn't mention it, but I guess the time of day, the which the noise should stop, as well as the level of the noise. So can, putting it in other words, can we impose the noise limit? What the title of it, which is more restrictive to environmental health? And the other question is, can we impose a fine which is in effect penal? You have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. So first of all, I would say that I think the update of the protocol does strengthen the noise angle that we've got already, but I also appreciate Mr. Topham wants us to go a step further. The reason that we're suggesting engagement with environmental health on specific events rather than a blanket decibel level is because different events, different nature play out differently. So that's why we think it's better to go from an environmental health point of view. And then as we've done with Oktoberfest that you just heard, have that robust review afterwards if even those noise levels agreed by environmental health aren't good enough or satisfactory enough, then taking further decisions. So I think that's the best route, the environmental health angle. If the committee wish to consider a specific decibel level, I think we would have to, would recommend that you approve the protocol as is today, but also you ask us to go away and provide some research as to what that level might be. Because I couldn't tell you right now as to what that suitable level would be. And I wouldn't be able to tell you necessarily the implications of each level as to what that would mean. So if you wish us to look into that, we could do, but I would advise still approving the protocol today as is if you're minded to do so. I think in terms of the level of deposit, we can increase that to whatever we wish it to be. Crucially, we do need to, which I think the protocol does, hang that deposit against something. So we need to be clear. The idea of using environmental health is that you've got legislative experts in that field who are advising us. So we could increase it. That may well be a deterrent. We have certainly in the past held on to various deposits. So we've held on to fly posting deposits before. We've certainly held on to reinstatement deposits. And so we would have no issue doing the same with noise. So that would be for the committee to look to increase that should you wish to. And just the last general point, I just think I mentioned that the committee does give robust reviews of events, as you've just seen. And it is the nature of the events, the duration, the timing that are the key consideration. But I wouldn't want the protocol to be too prescriptive that we narrow applications down at the start. I think we need to have a kind of a wide screening so that we can look at different events in their own way. And it's also difficult to separate. Could prove difficult for the committee or the council to separate community events and commercial events, because why would it be satisfactory for one event to go over a certain limit and another not to? There is kind of, I think there's a question mark to that. So that's my thoughts.
Yes, I haven't a clue who was first, so ladies first. That's a throw.
Thank you, Chair. On 5.10 of the protocol, it says about the event organiser should have a responsible person on site at the event who will monitor noise levels and deal with any noise complaints. Presumably that person would need to be independent and not the organiser themselves, but also, I mean, you can make the deposit as high as you like. If there aren't the necessary readings and it's not enforceable, then it's kind of a wasted effort anyway. The other thing is where are you taking those readings, and how do you take into account all the other environmental or external factors? So, for example, like with Oktoberfest, one weekend the noise was horrendous. And we're told that's to do with wind direction. And so those factors, at your home on that day, I'm sure the noise levels were much louder had the wind been blowing in the other direction. Where are you taking those readings? And I don't really know how you measure that impact. It seems like it's going to be quite variable.
Tom may have something to say, but let's have the other point.
And my question is also for the town clerk. It's probably a dumb question, or the clerk of the meeting, whoever's the better place to answer. Probably a dumb question, but why are the deposits for noise and fly posting scaled? Because presumably, fly posting, if you only have 100 people coming and you've plastered the town in billboards from St Albans to Harpenden Town Centre, it would still be fly posting in the same way as it would if it was a larger event. So I would have assumed it would be the same fine, whatever level of event you have. If you're breaking the noise or you're fly posting, I'm just slightly baffled by there's a scale. There's probably a good answer to that.
The town clerk could respond to those, and also if you could respond to my question about the timing of the events. Do we have a events must finish by a different time, and do we impose different times for different events?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Councillor Cowley's question, I'll try and provide a sensible answer, but it might not be one. My sense, the two reasons why there's a scale, partly the size of the event often reflects the licence fee they may pay. And so we try to reflect the deposits against the licence fee. But also some of the smaller events, smaller medium events are normally some of the smaller community events. So taking larger deposits off smaller community organisations sometimes doesn't always work. But that's probably the best reason I can give for that. But there isn't, as far as I'm aware, any other logical formula to that. Perhaps that answer might not be good enough. In terms of the timings, Councillor Butterworth, what we do when we receive an application, that sets out the timings. We carry out an initial screening as officers. If quite clearly we think that type of event is being proposed to go on at a time that is inappropriate, we will request changes at that point before it even comes to the committee. We then, where there are timings that are not allowed to go past, we put them in the terms of hire and in the conditions. So that restricts them to do that. But really, we just try to use a bit of a common sense approach in that many event organisers would love to go quite late into the evening. So, for example, the cinema have always requested to finish much later than we allow them to. And so that's us as officers screening them and saying, no, it's completely unreasonable to go until past midnight, whatever the time is agreed is reasonable. So as part of the application process, part of our screening, the time we try to link to the type of the event, and then we set it out in the agreed terms with them. And in terms of noise monitoring, so part of the engagement with environmental health should be not just about noise levels, but also the areas that it should be monitored. And so the common, there'll be certain roads that you heard earlier on that will need to have spot checks, and we would be expecting the event organiser to carry those out and document and evidence them. So that's the proactive side. But of course, we are then relying on someone to do that. So there is the reactive side of spot checks as well. So our events team go out at times and get a sense of noise. We don't necessarily have do formal checks like environmental health work, but we do go out and do spot checks. And if we aren't happy, we will then make referrals to environmental health. That's happened before. But also, if there are complaints by residents, we refer those through to environmental health and ask them to come out and carry out spot checks. And where possible, we go with the environmental health officers to do that, so that we've got presence, so that if what's being delivered on the day is counter to what the agreement is, we can directly challenge those individuals or the event organisers. So there's kind of a proactive element in agreeing up front what they should be doing. There's also the reactive element to that. I think that covers off the three broad questions.
Councillor Scriven had a question.
Just off the back of that comment, really, is how responsive are environmental health? Is it a case that they will come out straight away, or do they come out and respond next week?
Yeah, I mean, I can only talk from my experience here, and actually they've been really good. So we don't have lots and lots of issues historically with our events, but I can't think of an example where we've been sitting going, oh, they didn't turn up. So actually they've been, to be fair, very responsive. So yeah, don't have an issue with that. Just on the scaling point, have you got any thoughts on why the deposits change? We'll move on then.
No, I haven't. I've got nothing further. I mean, the thought that occurred to me was what you were saying about that the smaller events are usually small community events, and you try to set figures which are proportionate to perhaps what they would be able to afford, and whether it's of a charitable nature normally.
Colin?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, that is a very good and sensible answer. And I assumed it would be something along those lines, but I just wanted to make sure I was asking a potentially daft question in case it wasn't a daft question. As I think is important to do when I come to these things. Just on the point about noise monitoring, so just to try and get a bit more sort of clarity on it. You mentioned the spot checks on specific roads. Is there a point that environmental health will say, you must do outside number 3 on this road, or is it anywhere on the road? So I'm just thinking of Southdown Road as a particular example. I'm not entirely sure where Mr. Topham lives, but if they're doing it up at the end by the co-ops versus down in the sort of middle, then that might well have a different level of noise, depending on where you take the measurement along the road.
Yeah, so Chair, I think that their advice is generally around kind of zones, if that makes sense. So this is based on the information you provided about this event, this is the areas that we would expect to have a negative impact. And so these are the broad zones that we'd expect you to check. I think that's how I've seen it work in the past, locally.
That's right.
Yeah, as I understand your comments earlier, you're mainly concerned about recurrent events.
Yeah, as I said, the one-day events, mostly community events of all sorts. It's commercial events that run with a commercial purpose.
So if it's just a one-day event, then you don't need a noise limit.
That would more or less say it, yeah, to be honest. I mean, most people who are a one-day event, I mean, car event, the motorbikes make hell of a din, but by 8 or 9 o'clock, they've all gone home. It's fit for purpose. It's a type of event. This is a very commercial event. And my request is to avoid doing this again by having some structure that's a little less sort of dependent on this agency and that agency. Because I'll ask you, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'll ask you a question. I mean, when the Oktoberfest was doing their party in my front garden, I never saw anybody come on and measure the noise except me. So by the time you got to measure the noise, it was basically because I'd measured it, I'd moaned to Mr. Butterworth, and some other people had moaned, and the websites were going bonkers. Nobody from the council was there. I even saw a comment on the website which said when people rang up the council, nobody answered the phone. So the process doesn't work, in my humble opinion. Therefore, the prescriptive approach is there isn't a process, and there are. Obviously, it's ridiculous to think that people here at 11 o'clock at night wandering out with decibel meters and all the rest of it. Is you need to encourage people not to do it at all. As if they want to run a really bad event, they won't do it here. Thank you. Sorry, that's a long answer to the question.
Yes, Scott, if you could answer that, then part of the answer I suggest is how your team works. I mean, it's a small team, but this is an important part of what we do. How do they work? What hours do they work? When there's a big event on? So what's the process?
Well, the process is when it's a third party event, then the onus is on the event organizer to have the proactive pre-agreed arrangements and then to monitor that, which it sounds like they may not have been at the time, and then to react to any issues that they either find themselves or that are reported to them. So in the case of the event that you referred to, they've got the evidence to say they did react. Now, whether they reacted off their own monitoring or after someone made a complaint, that's I don't really know. So
personally, I think it's when the police turned up.
Well, potentially, yeah. So in terms of our own events, so our role in third party events, we're generally on call. So where there are issues, it's not been unknown for me to hot foot down or for one of our management team to hot foot down to try and deal with that. But we do try to engage through environmental health in the first instance because they are the ones that have got the powers to deal with this. And then our own events, of course, whenever we're delivering our own events, we have events on our team on for the duration of that. But yeah, we are in terms of an events team, we are 2 officers and then wider management team that are on call to deal with issues that are significant. That does not always mean that they might be there in person, but sometimes that on call is bringing the right people to make sure that they're there in person, the people that need to carry out the right surveys or the right investigations.
Yes, I think you have answered the question about environmental health because they have expertise and enforcement powers, and you confirmed that they are reactive. They're not proactive, but they are reactive.
Yeah, and Chair, just worth adding, whilst they have the legal power, we would also have the powers to stop an event at any time that's running on our land, and that is set out within our terms and conditions. That's very clear, and so we've never had to do that. But
that would be very extreme.
It would be very extreme, yeah, very extreme. We've only come close once in my time here.
The point that remains sort of been left hanging is the level of fines. If they're small, there's no consequence. There's a legal problem in making them too large, and we can't enforce penalties as part of a contract. Of course, enforcement is what the environmental people at St Albans are all about. But the amounts do seem rather small. For example, with the noise, the 50 times per complaint is up an hour. You may get 100 complaints. If you've got a dozen, then that's a really, really big event. But still, it's a lot of money around because commercial event that still doesn't amount to very much. It just seems too small to worry about. There's almost too much admin for us to make it even worthwhile going for it. Is that something we should look at? Do you often enforce it? I suppose that's.
I would have to check back on the noise side of things. I think we have done once or twice. The main enforcement on deposits have been the other 2, reinstatement and the fly posting. But we could. It sounds to me that the major issue, the major noise issue, is with the major event. So if you were looking to tweak any of the noise deposits, it seems to me that it's that major event one that's the one that is the one that needs to be looked at. My only concern with that is that major events covers any events over 1,000 people, which would bring into play a lot of community events as well. So we would then be asking the likes of the Rotary, the Lions to pay a greater upfront deposit as written at the moment. What you could do is you could have so it's appropriate that all event organisers, regardless of who they are, pay some deposit. You could have almost a second major category that where they are major events that are musical in nature, then the noise deposit is a higher figure because that may cover off the risk linked to the nature event. And where they are commercial events, you may wish to do that, or you could just change it completely.
Or could you make it that the charges that amount at the discretion of the officers? In other words, you may choose not to enforce against MedCap, but you were usually rule against the cinema, for example. Because usually there's no discretionary enforcement. I mean, there will be environmental people. But, they would have to levy a fine simply because they have the power to.
Yep, you could do that way.
Sorry, Carly.
Sorry, I'm aware that I'm asking potentially a lot of dumb questions today. With the just to bring the 2 points together, so the point about it, a single day event being sort of more okay and a multi-day event being slightly more difficult, and categorization of major events potentially not allowing for community events to have sort of lower fines, not fines, sorry, deposits. Is it worth adding something in about a major event which takes place over a number of days versus a major event that is a single day one-off event. Because it strikes me that that's a thing that we could do quite easily. And that would, I think, enable us to marry the two positions sort of reasonably nicely, unless there's some reason why this is not possible or a bad idea that I haven't quite thought of in the.
Can I intervene just with the danger of examining a pinhead here? I've quite much contributed to that sort of criticism. There are various ways of looking at this. The town clerk's suggestion is that we approve this, as it is, but that the committee asks the town clerk and the team to look again at this area of noise in the light of this conversation debate, as to whether there are any further refinements that can be made to address the difficulties that residents nearby experience. And we'd look at those at the next meeting, but certainly a subsequent meeting. And I suspect they're going to be tweaks rather than being fundamental. But we have heard your comments and they sound pretty sensible.
Appreciate it.
So is that the way?
Yeah, I mean, I just had one thought on that and one more general thought about the whole document. Really. One quickly on the noise. I mean, the way I see it is that, and this isn't necessarily a binding document. My view is if we got a proposal like Oktoberfest and it was a multi-day event which could create a lot of noise, we could say, okay, well, because that will come to the committee at a particular point. We could say, because there's a higher risk, we think on this particular application, we're going to say that there's going to, whether we want to hire noise deposit just on this one application, If they don't want to pay that deposit, then we don't have a new high deposit that we set for that one event because we think it's an extraordinary event, say. Then we can say, well, we don't want that event. They don't want to pay that high deposit. That's one thing. I agree about duration, and I would probably think. I mean, I don't want to unnecessarily go through the document too much, but where it says like 4.1, I mean, where it says the type and size event, if we had formally something about duration in the document, I'd probably be a little bit happier given the things we've had with Oktoberfest. But like I said, this is probably something that would, whether it's actually in the document or not, I suspect officers would look at when it comes to giving us a recommendation on that particular event. And the second thing I wanted to mention, which isn't in the protocol itself, is on, perhaps in light of Oktoberfest potentially, is the review of events after, say particularly new events after a year, or if it's a traditional event where we might have a problem, even say we had Classics on the Common and there's one event, 1 year where it was something extraordinary happened, or we didn't, or it's lots of noise or something. So just something about review of events, particularly that it can come to committee. I mean, I suspect it probably might not need to go in the protocol because it seems to me like the protocol is a document between the council and third parties. But I think the Oktoberfest, for example, I don't want to talk too much about the Oktoberfest, but the Oktoberfest last year, we approved it for a pilot for 1 year. It didn't come to committee on the second year. And I feel like, so last year it happened. And the first time I saw about it was, I'm not sure if we approved do we approve the events every year?
Yeah.
Okay, so I probably dismissed it. But I feel like perhaps on particular events, I would like to see something like that to come to the committee specifically without having to remove it from I say like last year, there wasn't an option for this committee to decide to remove Oktoberfest. And I'm worried that if we had a new event like that, which after 1 year we pilot, doesn't necessarily come to committee. I'd like to see some like review formalization, formal review that comes to committee a bit more.
Can I put that slightly differently? Because if this program, this committee has pro-ratificated committee, then we all had an opportunity, we just didn't take it.
Yeah.
But maybe the point is because the officers are our eyes and ears, except but it's very noisy. We really is, as it were. So I think the point is that maybe we're too ready to knock things through, and maybe the events protocol each year should have commentary from officers as to what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, and if there are any particular problems we should take into account before approving next year. If it's major, you will tell us, of course, this, you have this time. But just so it doesn't get nodded through without anyone thinking about it. Just thought.
Yeah, Chair, and certainly, you've got our commitment, and that's what we do, and we'll continue to do that, for sure.
I'd like to draw to the close, but
Just a couple of really brief comments on the wider report, really. I just wondered whether impact on the grounds is something that should be considered in the process of considering an application. I didn't know. I know that you have the reinstatement. Is there ever a case where actually no amount of money can, or any amount of money will always be able to fix whatever damage is done? So I just queried that. And that's minor. Batford Springs White can only hold a small one. I don't know if there's access and parking, perhaps. And then lastly, on the event booking application form, you've got type event, nature of event, and then brief overview of event. I wasn't really sure what the difference between all of those things were. And I wondered if maybe some examples, in there might just certainly help me to fill out the form.
Yeah, Chair, so we can have a look at the application form, see if there's anything we can make clearer, because if you're flagging that to Scriven, then other people will, I'm sure. But what we mean by those different things are, so the type of event links back to one of the earlier paragraphs, is it a community event, charity event, commercial event? The nature event is what's going on. Is it everyone's getting drunk, or is it donkey rides, or whatever it is? So those are the how we distinguish. But I think actually we should probably have some narrative with these columns, so people know what they should be put in each section.
Yeah, because you've also got a brief overview of event below that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. They've just looked into it.
Yeah. So in reality, what happens, to give you some reassurance, is the event officers work through this with the applicants, so they answer questions as you go along. But I appreciate it's not super clear at first sight. Batford Springs is because it's a very small site, and the wider infrastructure for events there is quite difficult. We tend to try to focus neighbourhood events there where people will walk to, so that's why that would be like the small. And then on the reinstatement side, that really is, should say that very much is a deposit, and we will and have done taken the full costs of reinstatement. And there are some event applications or ideas that come forward to us at certain times of the year that we just, as officers, as part of our screening, we say, no way. And there are also some lessons that we've learned from allowing events to run at different times. For example, the circus a couple of years ago now, where they operated later in the year, which in the world of hindsight was not a good idea and not something that we would ever put forward to committee in the future.
Should it not then be listed under the process for considering an application? Just a thought anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter either way, I don't think, in terms of.
Yeah, I was just checking. I wonder whether something has come out when we've done the update. So there should be a line in there that talks about our consideration of the impact of the event on the physical and social environment.
Okay,
So that's what we mean.
Sorry, I missed that, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to conclude. Okay. On page 82, the recommendation committee has to approve the proposed changes set out in the agency events protocol. But rather than changes set out, I suggest it should be approved and proposed revised HTC events protocol. Exactly. And I suggest we vote on that without any formal amendment. But it be on the understanding, which we don't need to formalise, and suggest that officers will take another look, particularly at noise, and come back to the committee in the next meeting on the after and that officers have freedom to formalise, either to tweak the application form to make it slightly more user-friendly as they think fit. So the recommendation is committee has to approve the proposed revised agency events protocol in Appendix A. I'm proposing that. A seconder. That's a scribble and hand up first. So yes, is that, I think that, is that unanimous? Yeah, sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Public speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chopper. Okay.
Oh, thank you all for listening to me and being so very patient.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Taking it on board to some extent. So thank you very much. Thank you, the town clerk.
Okay.
Pleasure.
And I think you're going to have a quiet evening this evening. So
If I can stop gabbling, it'd be good. Cheerio, guys. Thank you.
Councillor Freeman had already apologised. No, it's not quite what I said in terms of the order at the front, but Leslie Thomas, the Flowers, sorry, has been patiently listening quite some time. So I think we should deal with the sustainability market, right? Some words.
I promise I'm not coming back.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, fine. So is the meeting clerk going to report?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Regarding the sustainability market, the location review, Harpenden Town Council has worked with the organisation Sustainable St Albans to hold the Harpenden Sustainability Market for some time now. One of Harpenden Town Council's business plan objectives is for the council to help lead the way in creating a more sustainable town. And for this reason, we are recommending that we continue to support the sustainability market. The report contains more detail, but the report proposes that the committee approves that the council continues to work in partnership to hold the sustainability market on the basis that it is held on the area of common just in front of the area nearest to Park Hall. In 2023, that's considered to be the most appropriate location for it.
Because
following on from the review that the Community Services Committee looked at in quite great detail about the location of the normal monthly farmers market, the implications on the community are far less if it takes place here. And in addition to that, it has also traditionally been the place where other markets, such as when we've had European markets in the past, they've usually been located on this area out here.
thank you. Okay, yes, indeed, we did discuss location markets in March and July. Okay, so Leslie Flowers, would you like to?
My new friends.
Bit out of view there, yes, please do. Yes, you're welcome. You two are not a resident, are you?
I am a resident.
You are a resident, that's fine. Then the floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm actually going to support the motion, unlike the speakers. So my name's Leslie Flowers. I'm Harpenden resident, and I'm also a trustee from Sustainable St Albans, with the trustee that leads on the sustainability markets. So speaking to support the location and to support the continuation of the market, we obviously work, Sustainable St Albans obviously works towards making the town and whole district more sustainable. The particular benefits of the sustainability market to Harpenden and the area are that it supports small businesses. We've had about 60 or 70 stallholders now. We sent a survey to 54 of our stallholders in July, and we got a response rate such that 60% of them said that the market was a really significant factor in their business. And of those replying to our survey, nearly 40% of them had their first stall at this market. They've then gone on to grow their businesses or to set up websites. So we're supporting really small eco businesses, as well as some established ones, mostly from within Harpenden,
and the surrounding areas, quite a few from Hemel or Luton and Redbourne as well. The virtue of the way we run the markets, obviously there is support from the excellent team that Carl has in terms of Harriet and Faye, but it does also run on a lot of volunteer time, which actually means these markets for stallholders are much cheaper than all the other markets in the area, and Marks and St Albans, which enables small businesses that actually don't necessarily sell that much but want to get the word out to their to residents to be able to have stores at the market. In terms of particular location, benefit of having out here, it's certainty. We can run it. We're running it in the same location throughout the whole year. We can promote it in the same place. You'll all have seen these, which have got different location on them that we've had for the year. The venue here is actually for gazebos is actually also larger than the one on the High Street. So we can have 50 or so gazebos out there in the same way as Art on the Common does, which enables us to have a larger market. In terms of Sustainable St Albans, then obviously all of the stalls they're all sustainable businesses. They're all doing great things in the district. There are people doing. You can come and get your toiletries, washing up liquid filled up. You can come and learn about all sorts of sustainable products. You can come and learn about what we're doing. We had electric bike people there. Everything is to do with sustainability. So basically, I'm here to support the market continuing and to support the location and to say thank you for Carl's team for
Okay, thank you, Ms. Burns. I'm delighted you're delighted. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Comments questions from anyone? Doesn't seem to be controversial. So if there are no comments or questions, we'll throw hands. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. I said we do 7.6 review of fund fair charges early on, simply because it relates to the items we've had. So let's do that now. 7.6, page 46.
Okay, Chair.
Yep.
Fair charges were last increased by this committee in November 2019. The committee have been asked to increase the charges in line with the September 2022 Consumer Price Index CPI figure of 10.1%. And that it's as simple as that, really. The report then goes on to outline the details of what the current charges are and what the increased price would be, what that actually means.
Thank you. Okay, so, yep. Did have more income than. Not a huge difference, but okay. Any questions, comments?
Just to clarify, is this going to affect any of these fun fairs? You know, the number of people that come with 10%. Of course. Do you see any impact on the businesses?
No, Chair. So I think we're really careful when we put forward these recommendations to ensure that we're not pricing fun fairs out. So we're pretty confident in this. One of the reasons why we're putting this forward now, even though it's a relatively small increase overall for us, is the danger is if we don't do it this year and we consider it next year, then by the time you catch up, you're then looking at quite substantial increases, which then might impact their ability to come along or might actually cause other sort of negative reactions. So we feel that on balance, this will be okay. And you know, I don't think we will certainly lose any fun fairs. There was a rich history of all of these coming along, I think. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Can we put it to vote? Propose in a second there. Councillor Cowley was first up anyway. I think that was unanimous. Is it? Yep. Thank you. So, okay. Back to the official, that's 7.1 for the permanent tracker.
Yeah, yes, Chair. So this report, as normal, as is usual for these committees, presents the current forward planner and resolution tracker and asks the committee to note and approve them as per the recommendations at 2.1.1 and 2.1.2.
Anything in particular noteworthy that we need to take account of?
I haven't got anything specific to bring to the attention of the committee. You will note that there's quite a few things that will come off of the tracker if you approve it.
Okay. Right, any comments, questions? First, we adopt the recommendation, the second, Caroline, my official seconder. Please.
Yeah.
I think it's very formally at the beginning for obvious reasons. Continue. Okay, so that was 7.1, 7.2, budget control.
Yes, Chair. So budgetary control 2022-2023. This report represents the actual expenditure and income position as of the 30th of September 2022. So for the 6-month period for the financial year 2022-23. This report relates only to the community services budget, not the total cost and town council budget. This report shows a favourable variance of £26,000, almost £8,000 of which is staff cost savings due to the fact that we haven't recruited one of the town ranger posts. And also income has increased from the golf course licence due to increased membership numbers that is linked to the income that we receive. And also the general item referred to there, which was income that wasn't budgeted for, was that we had a contribution towards some of the horse ride work from the Harpington Common golf course. And there's more detail relating to all of that in bullet points 3.11 to 3.15.
Okay, any questions or comments? Thank you for that.
It's maybe a silly one on page 31. It's 3.2. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee to be approved 11,500. Obviously, the Platinum Jubilee was some time ago. I'm just wondering if that's been looked or why it still says to be approved.
Yeah, so Chair, I can pick that one up. So that's the release of the funds is to be approved, not the allocation of the funds. So we have this quirky thing where we have to allocate funds in the reserves, and then formally have a resolution to release them as well.
Okay.
So the release is the kind of the accountancy bit. We try to do both at the same time, but sometimes there's like a bit of a lag with them. So that's what that means.
Comes from the point of the fair, because it's not clear from the words. Trouble with this time, but maybe we could think about another time the leading words which is perhaps explain that.
Yeah, Chair, I think we need to just distinguish that release thing. Actually, hot off the press, I think these are actually all been released now by CPF recently. So that's it's not but noted, we need to make that clear.
Any other comments or questions? We started on to I propose. All those in favour?
Or just noting.
Okay, well. Point 3 budget second look.
Oh, right. Thank you, Chair. Second look, budget 2023 to 24. This presents the estimated position for the community services budget for the year 2023 to 2024. This budget will go before both Corporate Policy and Finance Committee and the Council during January. There are still some unknowns, for example, what the council tax base will be for 2023 and 2024. Some things have changed since the budget was reviewed 2 months ago, and they are outlined in the report, but specifically in relation to staff costs because of the salary increase agreement, and also the proposed changes about national insurance contributions. And then there's also an inflationary increase on the income that we receive for the public toilets from St Albans District Council. Points of note is that inflation clearly presents an uncertainty. The figure for October released today is 14.2%. The budget figure for 2023-24 is currently forecast as £1,196,000, which is plus £101,000 on the current budget. I think that they're the key highlights here, Chair, and the committee.
Sorry, just looking at total expenditure for this coming year budgeted. You said 1,196. If you had one, could it be 1,196,000?
If I didn't say what I meant to say, the current forecast was I meant to say 1,196,000. Sorry, apologies if I said something different.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I just add a couple of updates on this, because you've been asked to look at the current forecast. There are two things that we are aware of that's worth just mentioning to you now. First of all, in light of the decision earlier on this evening about the events programme, that does mean there's a further £10,000 loss of commercial income in the current forecast budget for next year. So that would be an adjustment that is to be made. And also just to flag, Phil made the point about inflation, the grounds maintenance contract inflation figure is taken from December of the year. So based on the figure that's released today, we would expect that the grounds maintenance contract figure that you've got in here to also be increased as well.
Mr. Johnson, what's in terms then?
So if it was to be 14.2%, that's roughly about an extra £11,000.
Yeah, any questions?
Very quick one on the page 36 commercial income. You've got Legion Fitness as the only income being generated on common. I just query how many different people are seen to be giving private lessons in the park, for example, and on the common. Seems much more than one.
So Chair, formally on the common, we in addition to Legion Fitness, there was some sort of yoga group that had a license as well, which no longer exists. Which is why the point was made that only Legion Fitness exists there now. But Councillor makes a really good point, and things that we have that the council of officers have done over the last few months is they identified that there was a commercial rugby organisation that was using Rothamsted Park, and that's licensed, and we receive income from them. And we've taken over the multi-use games area in Rothamsted Park. We are just investigating there the commercial use of that as well, with a view to putting licences in place. We do allow Harpenden residents who use personal fitness trainers. We don't charge when it's a one-to-one or a one-to-two type arrangement, because there are benefits for the local residents. But we do try to identify when there is big commercial interest, and then we try to put a licence in place so that the council receives appropriate remuneration.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, Councillor Scriven?
A couple of things. Does Camp Green have a licence? Camp Green, I understood that they did group training sessions quite regularly in Rothamsted Park. That's as part of the multi-use games area. But then also the tennis courts, do we have any forecast on what income that may bring?
So regarding Camp Green, if I may, Chair, I'll go away and find out the answer for that. And unless the town clerk knows the answer, otherwise I will go away and research it and respond to committee members on that one.
Thank you.
Regarding the tennis courts, town clerk, would you like to?
Yeah, so I think Phil will pick up on the Camp Green, but it's certainly a name that I've heard recently, colleagues being mentioned. So I think that's one on the list that we're following up. In terms of the tennis, there are also some tennis users that were using that under the previous contract that we're engaging with. There are other groups that want to take it on and do coaching. And we've had quite a number of inquiries for the tennis courts already, I understand, partly because they've heard that we're kind of serious about maintaining them and having them to a high standard, so people want to come and use them. We'll have a better idea of what those figures will be, but you're talking of like the hundreds of pounds rather than the thousands of pounds. It's not a significant amount. The aim with the tennis courts in particular is to have the formal management under our wing for 12 months, really learn about it a bit more to see what demand is, and then perhaps this time next year we'll have a better idea as to whether there are other commercial license opportunities for it.
Any comments, questions?
Yeah, the committee is asked to note the current forecast position regarding the 2023-24 budget.
Absolutely by vote. All in favour? Unanimous. Okay, page 41, reporting committed tree planting.
Yes, Chair, this report seeks the committee's approval for the commemorative planting of 2 Hopper Beech trees within Rothamsted Park. Now, these would be in memory of the late Queen Elizabeth II and also to celebrate the proclamation and coronation of King Charles III. As stated in the report, these types of trees are, the copper beeches are considered to be the appropriate ones because they will, by their appearance, they will stand out as different within Rothamsted Park, but they were also what Her Majesty and His Majesty planted at Balmoral whilst launching the Queen's canopy.
Yep, fine. Any kinds of questions? Okay, I propose. Unanimous, yes, thank you. Okay, on Harmon and Balloon competitions.
So yes, Chair, the Harpenden and Balloon competitions, this is generally brought before this committee around this time of year, every year. The competitions that were run this year, as you will see from the report, that we don't get huge numbers of people that participate in them. But what we would like to do is we're asking the committee to reapprove these competitions for us to run next year. We will try to market them more widely so that to try to attract more applicants, and then this time next year we'll report back to the committee on how successful that has been, and that will then determine what the report says in a year's time.
Thank you. Further questions? Mr. Scriven.
Very short one. I presented the awards for these, and the schools that did partake and received awards were delighted. And actually, the prizes were really generous. And I wonder if actually you highlighted, and I know it's difficult because probably they're donated, so you can't guarantee the prizes. But perhaps if it was highlighted, there are prizes to be won, it might kind of generate a bit more interest in participating.
Thank you.
Can I ask, so I was familiar with this some years ago. Do we no longer do best trunk on, best background?
Chair, the answer to that is that I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, This committee decided not to continue with the best front garden because we weren't receiving any applications for it.
I can understand that. You have an interest, but I don't think I should need clarity. But, my wife was a gardener, edited one year, many years ago, and one of the first year she entered, which was partly her excellence as a gardener and partly very few people created. So I can understand why that's lapsed. It would be a pity to have to do the same with the ones that involve schools, but equally, we don't want to do it if there's very small interest. So good luck with drawing it.
So the committee is asked to approve the 2023 competitions as outlined within this report.
But may I ask actually, what's the cost to us? Is it much, or is it just sort of lost in the roundings?
It's general in terms of financial cost. It's just really the cost of the vouchers and the prizes, which isn't too great. The biggest cost is the amount of time that officers spend administering this. But we are very fortunate at the minute. I think that one of the factors that makes these successful is we have a couple of members of the community who are very active in supporting the competitions by carrying out the judgings, going around looking at the sunflowers and things.
Yeah, and it's really benefit to the community and involves the school children. So can I propose? Right, the next one, 46, we've done. 49, we've done. So, well,
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report presents the proposed management plans for the 4 newly acquired play areas, the areas that were taken over from St Albans District Council, which includes Parva Close Recreation Ground, Wood End Play Area, Roundwood Green Space and Oakley Road Play Area. But also this report includes a management plan for Fovant Close Community Orchard, which was an asset that existed previously for Harpenden Town Council, but didn't have a management plan in place for. The proposed plans are included in the pack. The plans were created by our Green Spaces development officers. They then carried out some local community engagement and invited comments on the plans. And I think one of the most notable things that the community engagement feedback shaped was the fact that in the original draft of the Parva Close management plan was a suggestion for a bench. But the community engagement highlighted that in the past there had been a bench in there and it created antisocial behaviour problems. So as a result of that community engagement, we removed the plan to put a bench back in there. And the committee are asked to approve these management plans, please.
Can I ask, are there any more there in the work? Yeah, covenants and orders. I do have all of them. We're getting.
Yeah, Chair, we've had all the ones that we've asked for.
And once we approve these, we'll have management plans for all of them. There are no gaps.
Yeah, so we've already,
Yeah.
yes.
Any comments and questions?
Part of Close, you talk about putting in an apple orchard containing 10 apple varieties. Questioning whether having 10 apple trees in an orchard, just the reasoning behind that, why you wouldn't have apple, pear and cherry as you do in Fovant Close. And I'm thinking more along the lines of apple trees produce an enormous number of apples, and what on earth are we going to do with them all? Yeah. So I just like if you had a bit more variety, you might have.
Yes, Chair, this may be something that I need to go away and get an answer on, because I can remember hearing the Green Spaces development officers talking about I've heard them expressing views on different fruit trees before, but I must admit I can't remember what it was specifically that they were saying. In terms of the apples, I think that we're hoping that members of the community around there will benefit from them and be able to just take them and use them in the same sort of way as there are some apple trees on the common in the area of where St John's Church is, and people can help themselves to those.
That's what giant
That's what I
crumble.
was going to say.
Sorry?
Said alternatively make a giant crumble.
For a couple of other
Yes.
things, if I may.
Oh, sorry, just on that one, you will look into the.
Yes, I'm
I
looking
know
into
to make it forward, I know.
Yeah. Talk about also extending the basketball court. Is that extending it to a full court or making the half court bigger, if that makes sense? And then finally, just on all of them, there's talk about increasing the number of bins, which is great, reduce the litter. Does that have any implications for the grounds management contract and obviously emptying all the bins?
Yes, Chair. So regarding the basketball, it's quite small at the minute, to the extent that our Green Spaces Development Officer thinks that it's probably quite difficult to actually even play shooting on there. So it's a small extension. It's not turning it into a full court. The other question about the implication upon the grounds maintenance contract, the answer is yes. For each additional bin that we install, there is a small cost. Again, I have got that somewhere. I can't remember from memory how much it is, but there will be I think it's around £60 a year, but I can look that up and send that out to you as well.
Any other questions? So the motion is 2-1 that we approve the proposed management plans. Which should be named areas. I propose a vote. Going unanimous. I think all of them are unanimous. Unless I missed something, I think that means we have the.
Memorial request.
Oh, 96, so it's in the middle of that, lost that on 96.
So yes, Chair, this report presents 2 requests that have been received for memorial benches to remember 2 different Harpenden residents. Both requests have been assessed by the Green Spaces Development Officer, who has identified appropriate locations for the benches and recommends them for approval to the committee.
Well, we got to how much we need to know. I want to know about the merits. The person who's the more they are. I couldn't prove it exactly the case. Oh, it says it's in 3-1 as well. Yeah, I'm confident. Okay, any comments, questions? Again, unanimous. We have now finished this.
That's the agenda finished.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone, and thank you for your patience. It's always challenging. Strong groups, and give your attention.